Okay, picture this. The government passes a shiny new law taxing the massive corporation that manufactures your absolute favorite smartphone. So, who actually pays that bill? Does the billion-dollar tech company just eat the cost out of their profit margins? Or does it quietly slip into your shopping cart? Welcome. Today we're doing a complete economic diagnostic to see who really pays the price for government interventions.
Welcome to this explainer on system overrides, supply, demand, and government policies. I am thrilled you're here. We are going to look really closely at exactly what happens when government policies intervene in natural market forces.
Here's what is on the system diagnostics menu today. We'll start with market equilibrium, then move through price ceilings, price floors, the tax wedge illusion, and finally, tax incidence.
Part 1. The holographic market equilibrium, the baseline.
Right, so before we can start looking at system overrides, we have to understand how the system works on its own. Without government intervention, prices aren't just haphazard numbers slapped on a label. They are literally the ultimate coordinating mechanism for millions of individual decisions. In a free market equilibrium, buyers and sellers naturally find this perfectly balanced point. The price acts like an incredibly efficient signal, ensuring that exactly what is supplied meets exactly what is demanded.
Moving on to Section 2, Price Ceilings, System Override 1.
Let's introduce our first external intervention. Imagine a scenario where a group, let's call them the ice cream eaters, successfully lobbies the government because they firmly believe ice cream is just too fundamentally expensive for the average citizen. In response, the government passes a law capping the price. This is what we call a price ceiling. It's a legislated legal maximum on the price at which a good can be sold. Now, it sounds like an automatic win for the consumer, right? Cheaper ice cream, but let's run the model.
When we actually apply this, we see two totally different outcomes. In the first scenario, we have a non-binding ceiling. Say the natural equilibrium price of an ice cream cone is $3, and the government caps it at $4. Well, the system operates completely normally, because the cap is above the equilibrium. But in the second scenario, we get a binding ceiling. If the cap is legally set at $2, it violently clashes with the natural data streams of supply and demand. The market desperately wants to push the price back up to $3 to balance things out, but the law physically restrains it.
And this perfectly illustrates the real-world consequences of that constraint, using data from the 1970s OPEC gas crisis. Initially, the price ceiling on gas wasn't binding, but when the price of crude oil suddenly skyrocketed, the supply of gasoline fell. Ordinarily, that dropping supply would just push the price of gas up, but that binding price ceiling completely blocked it. The legal cap kept the price artificially low while supply completely crashed.
And boom, system error. This triggers an immediate and massive market failure, a shortage. When the ceiling is binding, the quantity demanded by consumers vastly exceeds the quantity supplied by producers. Sellers suddenly have to ration their scarce goods. During that 1970s gas crisis, this artificial cap didn't mean cheap gas for everyone. It meant hours-long lines at the pump, closed gas stations, and just massive frustration. The price couldn't rise to balance the market, so people ended up paying with their time instead.
All right, Section 3, Price Floors, System Override 2.
So let's totally flip the script and analyze the opposite intervention. A price floor is a legislated legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold. These tools are typically designed to protect sellers by ensuring prices don't drop too deeply. But just like a ceiling, legally blocking a price from reaching its natural resting point introduces a completely different but equally severe market anomaly.
The system error this time? A surplus. Because the price is forced artificially high, the quantity supplied outpaces the quantity demanded. The most critical and definitely the most debated real-world application of this is the minimum wage. See, in the labor market, workers are the suppliers and businesses are the demanders. When a binding minimum wage forces the price of labor higher than the equilibrium point, it generates a labor surplus. And in the real world, a surplus of labor translates directly to unemployment, primarily for the least experienced, lowest skilled workers whose natural wage would have been below that floor.
Now, what is honestly super fascinating here is just how divided top economists are when we apply these theoretical models to complex human realities. When experts were polled on whether a $15 minimum wage would substantially lower employment for low-wage workers, 34% agreed, 29% disagreed, and a massive 37% were completely uncertain. It just goes to show that even among the highest levels of economic expertise, the real-world severity of these system overrides is heavily debated.
Section 4, the tax wedge illusion.
Okay,
Let's get into the most common, yet perhaps most misunderstood government intervention of all. Let's walk through the three-step domino effect of a standard tax. Step 1. Say the government levies a 50-cent tax on ice cream. Step 2. This policy literally drives a wedge between the price the buyer pays and the money the seller actually gets to keep. Step 3. Because buyers are paying more and sellers are receiving less, the overall incentive to do business drops. The physical size of the market actually shrinks as the optimal transaction volume collapses inward.
Watch this in action. Let's say the government forces the buyers to pay the tax. The entire demand curve just shifts straight downward by exactly 50 cents. The market equilibrium slides down the supply curve. So now, consumers are out of pocket $3.30, while sellers only get to take home $2.80. That 50-cent wedge right in the middle, that goes directly to government revenue.
So, who should a fair government target? The consumer? The greedy corporation? Well, myth busted. Our model proves that taxing buyers and taxing sellers are mathematically equivalent. Imagine the government just places a collection bowl on the store counter. It simply does not matter if the law requires the buyer to drop 50 cents in the bowl before eating, or if it requires the seller to drop 50 cents in the bowl after selling. The mathematical reality is that the exact same wedge is driven between the two parties, resulting in the exact same market shrinkage. But if taxing the buyer and the seller look completely identical, who is actually absorbing the financial hit?
Section 5. Tax incidence and elasticity.
To find out who really pays, we have to define tax incidence. This is the actual division of the tax burden between buyers and sellers after the market adjusts and settles into its new equilibrium. And the greatest illusion of all is this: the government decree doesn't actually dictate who feels the pain in their wallet. The market forces do.
The absolute key here is elasticity, which is really just a fancy economics term for flexibility. If supply is highly inelastic, meaning sellers cannot easily change their production or leave the market, then sellers end up bearing the heaviest burden of the tax. Conversely, if demand is inelastic, meaning buyers absolutely must have this product and just can't change their habits, then buyers bear the brunt of the burden. The side of the market that is less flexible, the side that cannot easily escape the tax, they end up footing the bill. And that happens regardless of whose name is actually written on the tax legislation.
All of these scenarios bring us right back to one of the foundational 10 principles of economics. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. Our models consistently prove that while government policies are usually very well-intentioned, free markets are incredibly efficient supercomputers at balancing themselves out. When we introduce system overrides, we inevitably create unintended ripple effects, whether that's a shortage, a surplus, or an invisible wedge that shrinks the economy altogether.
Which brings this whole thing right back to you. The next time you vote on a new tax or hear a politician promising a shiny new price control, look past the system override. Ask yourself, once the market shifts and the dust settles, where will that invisible wedge actually fall? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing the data, and I'll catch you on the next one.